All right, final stretch. We now have the ability to do the wallet export. So Nick shared that yesterday at the bottom of the list here. Was anybody able to test this out yet?
Yeah, it worked. I haven't posted on mainnet yet, but the wallet export worked.
Cool, awesome. So this is great. Can now publish from the same account as your user profile on mainnet. So that is great. You've got you and you've got your agent you. And I guess for right now, your agent can act on your behalf. We have the image API. It looks like people have been able to use this pretty well. I wonder what that avatar issue might have been, but it looks like other people are seeing it correctly. So we did have one person report some things here, but otherwise, pretty clear to people how to use the image API to upload your images and include your avatars and covers. From what I can see, it looks like people have been successful with that. And then full text search. So far, it looks like people have been able to use that pretty well. We do still have the questions, and I'm not sure how far people have gotten. Maybe we can come back to this, but on what the best flow is for people to use a full text search API and then manually kind of select what the best option is when you're looking things up by ID or by name. I guess it's the same thing. Well, no, by ID, it's a precise match. That's the thing, right? With full text search, it's not a precise match. So this is still an outstanding question for use cases where that's important. The GRC-20 lib, I think, is fully usable. And then one of the remaining things we have is CSV import. Byron, do you want to give an update on this, and or if there's any examples that you want to give people, like a brief kind of sneak peek at how this is going to look?
Sure. I can share my screen. Let's see. See if I can find something like workable really quick.
Cool. And I just put you on the spot. We also have something else that I did not share on the call on Monday, but is definitely worth bringing up with the group, which is number and time formatting. And we can share some updates on that as well. Would it be better to jump to that first, or you think you've got something?
Yeah, let's do the time formatting thing so I can put this together real
Okay,
quick.
cool. I'm just putting everyone on the spot. It's a fun way to go. So yeah, let's see the trigger fingers. Mika, would you like to share an update just for folks? I know this is something that we hadn't mentioned a ton on the calls, but I did mention in Discord, and it's related to some of the stuff people are doing, right? Many of you have times, maybe it's like a publish date or something like that, or numbers, maybe you have dollars that you want to display. And Mika's been working on the formatting for that. Currently, the formatting isn't supported in the UI yet. Hey, Mika, show of hands. Has anybody, I think you should be able to do a show of hands thing or pipe up somehow. Has anybody actually set format options for any of the knowledge that they've published?
Nope.
Yeah, precedent. Okay, great. So, and what was that? Was that a time?
Yeah, it's a date. But I mean, the format didn't show up in the UI.
Correct. So this is coming right up. So we do want to test, and maybe the two of you could link up because Mika wanted to know he wanted some example data that someone had published. So perfect. Mika, yeah, do you want to just share a little bit? You can give a quick recap on the formatting, how that works.
Sure. Can I have a minute? I need to prepare my sort of
Sure.
environment for this.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
sounds
I'm ready to go.
okay, cool. All right, we're at this trigger finger competition. All right,
Cool.
let's do CSV.
Yeah. So this is a code sample. This is what I've been using to test the CSV import. So the CSV import is kind of comprised of two steps. So first is like the data representing the CSV. So we'll have a spec out for that to kind of outline what the format should be. The main kind of edge case that we need to handle is for things like relations, like making sure we're pointing to entities via relations in like a well-formatted way, well-specified way. And so there's the data for the CSV, like how you fill out like each row and each cell and like what that data looks like. And the other part is metadata about each column. So when you import a CSV or you fill out a CSV that's meant to represent knowledge that gets transformed into knowledge graph data, so like triples and relations, we need some information about like what the column is meant to represent, because just the cell and just the row by itself isn't enough information. We actually need to know like exactly like what each column represents. So like, is it a text field? Is it a relation? Which property ID is it supposed to be associated with? And things like that. So the API that we're coming up with is kind of geared around those two steps, the data and the metadata. So here, zoom in a little. I have an example of me taking some data, turning it into a CSV, and then supplying metadata for it. And so there's going to be a new op that's called import file. So if I go to, let's go to here. Actually, it might not be in here. Oh yeah, here it is. It's going to be new op that's import file op, which kind of has this format where it has type import file. So instead of like set triple or delete triple or create relation or delete relation, it'll be import file. And you'll specify a URL which represents the CSV that's been uploaded to IPFS. And then you'll also supply a metadata field, which contains information about the file itself. So if we look at this, the only file metadata we support right now is CSV. And so you specify the type and then any additional information about the column. So the ID is like the property ID, the type is like the value type, and then relation type. This is another thing where the relation might have like a specific type. So this might be like works at or something like that. Then there's also like, we need to know like what the ID of the row is. So there'll be a special column to specify like this, or sorry, the ID of the row. So there'll be a special column where you can fill out the entity ID for that row. So if you're importing a new entity, like a city or something like that, and it doesn't already have an entity ID, you'll supply that here, or I guess whether it has one or not, you'll supply it here, as well as like the options. So you might have like additional options, like if it's a text or a date field, you might want to supply like the formatting, or if it's a number field, you might want to supply formatting, or if it's meant to be a currency, you might want to specify like what the currency unit is and things like that. So that's kind of the parameters that you need to import the data. So in this example here, I have just this simple function to take a couple of arrays and stringify them into a CSV file. And then here is like an example of turning the metadata into the correct structure. So you can see I like have CSV and I have column information here. We're still like refining this, making sure that it's as simple as possible. Then here's an example where we like eventually have the CSV string. There's a new function in the GRC-20 library for uploading the CSV. So all you have to do is just pass it a string, the stringified representation of the file. That gets uploaded to IPFS. You take the CID. You can here you can see some of the new APIs for the smart account stuff that we just released yesterday. We take the CID, put it into the import file op, and then just publish the edits the same way we do for everything else. So the rest of this is familiar. There's a new function for getting the call data, so you don't have to write like the fetch calls and stuff yourself. So I don't think I announced that, but I pushed that yesterday. And then you just send the transaction. And then on the back end, it will read ops like it does every other single op, except now there's the new file import op. And then we'll take the contents of the CSV, we'll take the contents of the metadata and attempt to construct triples and relations representing the contents of the CSV. So I'm still working on the back end stuff. It's a little complex, mostly related to like how large CSVs can be. So there's going to be some reworking of the infrastructure on the back end to support kind of large imports of data, but I'm working on that now. Hopefully we'll have some good updates later today.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. So we're trying to get this in, and then the main thing we want to get this in for, hopefully by tomorrow, is to import the countries, states, and cities. So thanks for your patience on that. And then, we'll need to go through that flow, I guess, where we look things up using the fuzzy search API by name. That's the way that you can get the ID once it's created. And if you have relations to locations, you can do it that way. Cool.
When
Good
you
work.
do the CSV import, are you defining the geo IDs before uploading the CSV?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So the idea is just like before. Whenever you create new entities, we want the client to be responsible for generating the IDs. That way it's deterministic, right? We don't want there isn't a back end that can determine, that should deterministically generate IDs for new things. Cool. All right. Mika, formatting stuff.
Right, let me just share my screen. You should be able to see this now. So, currently in Geo, we show dates in this format, and there's no way to customize it currently. But as of version 0.6.0, there's a new option for value, which is called options. And we can configure formats, units, and languages for now. I'm currently implementing date formatting. So instead of rendering it like this, we will later be able to specify a list of formats that we can use and so on. You as well could do that programmatically, but just by passing this options, this format into the value options. And we decided to support Unicode date format specification. I will link this in the Hackathon channel later. But this is a standard specification, and you could format your dates and times in any way you want. So I'll drop all the resources in the Discord channel so you could take a look. And if you have any questions regarding it, feel free to contact me.
Awesome. Thank you. So excited for that. Looks like we already have one taker, so you guys can link up so you can see the example formats that Preston published. And then we also want to do it for number. The biggest thing with number is money, because people do things with like dollars. And so I did share an example in the latest email. So hopefully y'all have seen that for the number formatting. So for that one, it's also a matter of well, there's like the format. The format string is different for number versus for time, right? For time, it's that Unicode one that Mika just showed. For number, it's another one, and the name escapes me now, but it's in the email that I sent out, and let me see if I can pull it up. I also shared, I don't know if this email actually shows, so I guess it was in the Discord, what those formats look like. And oh, here, I can just show it here in the GRC-20 spec. So for numbers, it would look like this. It's ICU decimal format. So that would render something like this. Now, in the ICU decimal format, they have a different way of supplying the unit, right? And this little character here represents like the unit. But for us, we want the unit to be flexible, right? For example, in crypto, people are creating new currencies all the time. So you don't want to go through some whatever ICU standards process to get your currency added. And so for us, you specify the unit by ID. And I shared links to the entities on mainnet. You can look for like US dollar, and that's a currency. And right, it has a sign, it has a symbol. You can grab the ID and you pass that in for the unit. And we should be able to, once that's implemented, render, in this case, if you want the decimals, or if you don't want the decimals, then you drop this. And so those are the two things, time and numbers, and we'll try to have that over to you hopefully by tomorrow. So thank you for your patience there. And great job, Mika, so far. Excited for that to land.
Thanks, Anoop.
Thank you. Arturos, do you want to maybe pull up if you've seen common things come up? Do you want to pull up maybe the hackathon space, and we could take a look at some of the common types and properties, and maybe if there's common categories of things that you're seeing?
Yeah. So we reviewed the submissions from the week 4, and we already have some general sort of thoughts, what we see across different editors, maybe some feedback. Some of you already got the feedback, others you will get your feedback who submitted the forms today. And for now, like I would say a few things that I could mention from this. So first of all, naming conventions, we noticed in a few of the submissions, keep in mind first entity is the first capitalized, unless it's a name, other words should be lowercase. If you're using tags, for example, tags are their own entities, and they should also be with capital letter. For keeping data relational, we noticed there were few data sets submitted. For example, we had location, which had a string value. And so we don't have yet, I understand, the actual regions, but just like a note that we need to have that as a relational that links to the database. Aligning data with ontology. So this we saw.
I think that's maybe a good place to double click into. Do you want to do a quick search for the location property, just so we can remind people kind of what we have there?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and by the way, like for focus areas, for general sort of properties, we have here sort of the most popular ones that you might need to use, and this is like a good way to find, like the specific that you need. For example, location included.
Yeah. So if we look at location, right, you can have multiple relation value types, right? And these are kind of hints for what types of entities are you trying to point to with your relation. So location is going to be a common one, right? It's a good one to use for different things. Let's say you have a job opening. Location is a good property to use for that, if they're hiring in person in a particular city. And so you'll notice here that the common relation value types include region, right? And so a region can be a country, a state, or a city. Those are all going to be regions. It could be a place. So in the case of a job opening, you're not going to link to like a place, right? Like a specific building. I mean, you could say, here's the office where we're working, here's the location. But an event would have a location, and it could have multiple locations as well, right? So you could have like maybe the city, and then maybe you could have like the venue or something like that. That's an interesting thing. And then the address is a separate thing. Now, we haven't actually dived into addresses yet. I am seeing people using addresses for things, and that's usually done as text. I actually think that addresses are better done relationally as well, but you do need a little bit of like better UI for this. So Arturos, if you click on the address, right, an address here is its own type, and it has, right now we don't have ordering for the properties, but it's, the address line 1, address line 2's, city, country, state, country, zip code. Yeah, out of order. But the idea here is I do think the right way to represent addresses would be with this type of a structure. So this is an entity type, and then the name of the address would be the text for the address, right? So, 101 Grant Street, whatever, that could be like the name. You search for it by name and it shows up that way, but then that's actually an entity, and then you would see address line 1, line 2, the individual fields, right? Those components are individual properties on the address. So I haven't seen anybody do this yet. I have seen some addresses. I wonder if anybody could give this a stab, and I think this would be better than just having a text field for an address. Hopefully that makes sense. So these are different locations that you could have. So in different contexts, you'd point to different things. But that's one of the common ones that I've seen where I think there's room for improvement. A lot of the other stuff has been looking really good. Also projects. I think this is another one where a lot of times for company names, we're seeing those as strings. And a good reminder that, you kind of want to do that process where you look things up using the search API, try to find a match and use an ID if it exists. Otherwise, create like a project or a company entity and reference it by ID.
Here we have an example job opening, and we have a project property that has a value type. So it's a relation, and we should link to a project.
It actually, we didn't add a relation value type to that property, so worth adding.
Yeah, and so this we did notice in a few of week 4 submissions of the data examples. So we saw that some people are using, for example, a type institution for certain like publishers of content. Others have like type company and so on. So it's fine to have those types if they, if they need their own properties. Those entities should also have a type project. So project is all-encompassing type. Anything that is from book club to a international institution, all those things are projects. They have some basic properties. And if we are creating entities of the type project, we should be looking at what properties we can fill in. So these are the basics, that sort of the bare minimum here. But a good way to think about, once you're collecting your data, you're structuring it, a question is, how many properties that would be valuable I can create and then fill them in at scale? So, maybe it's not just the website that you can get. Maybe you can get teams that work in those projects as people, you can link them. Maybe, sort of area of industry where that project is involved in, whatever that you can get. And so that is essentially the ontological challenge is, first of all, definitely check of all of the types that you have, to what is the sort of the universal type that we have here that would meet that type, and this is the one that we want you to use. See if can you fill in these properties? If you can't, that is fine, but maybe there's other properties that you can fill in that we don't have. So let us know, and then we'll be adding those. We're checking if there are properties in your examples, and if we see that you can fill them in, we'll add those properties here. So just for that mapping. And in general, I would like to give an example of a really well shown ontology by Hackathon participant. So here we have a list of all types. This is by Preston, who has listed all of the types that he has for his project. And we see that there's a description. We see that there are properties that we can clearly check. So this makes it really easy and quick to sort of check, okay, what kind of properties are we filling in, and how are we dealing with that? Also props for being able to semantically group those types. So just by meaning of what the type is about. So we see the jurisdiction types and they're listed. We see the political party types and they're listed. Interestingly, this also, this ontology goes beyond just, let's say, legal sort of, space. It would be, this is politics, there are genders and so on, like much more universal root level types. But this is like a really great job for us to see like which types and what properties we have to do a good review. And so props for this good example. And that's the approach that we want to sort of see, if you're providing, let's say maybe you're unable to do it like this, at least we would need to see in your week 4 submission all of the, at least a link to each of the entity of the type that you have. So we need to see them all. Like I saw some that were provided in the week 4 that just added a few examples. We could find other types by just checking the connection. But just to make sure that we don't miss, it's better if we're shown exactly what ontology are we dealing with what you're presenting.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think that's really helpful for folks. So thank you. Yeah, I do think in the case of that Preston example, you know, he was able to reverse engineer how to publish the blocks and everything, which we weren't necessarily trying to cover in this hackathon. So it's totally fine if people aren't able to programmatically publish blocks. But especially as you get onto the mainnet, that becomes much, you know, it's something you can do in the UI, right? So here, I'll share real quickly. As people get access to mainnet, you'll be joining spaces as editors, or sorry, as members. And if you join a space, right, these have like ontology tabs. So you can manually do this, right? And ideally, once you have access to a space, you can come in, you know, if it's an academic field, you could set up the tables, right, for the courses, for the people, and then ontology. So this would be a good place to, for example, set up, you know, manually something like what Arturos is showing. Cool. So I think main thing from here is getting people onboarded, getting people on mainnet. You can now publish on mainnet. I'm seeing, you know, the content shape up really well. So that's great. And then just a reminder that we want to get things looking as nice as we can. So I'll dive just a little bit deeper on one interesting question that I think is going to continue to be a fluid thing, which is how we want to present data with what kind of filters. It's an interesting question. So we'll look at two examples here. We'll look at the San Francisco space and we'll look at the crypto space. So here we have a home page. And when you create the home page for a public space, you want it to be nice to browse. You know, combination of gallery views and list views is pretty nice. And, you know, whatever you think makes sense, top level information to have available for a given space. There may or may not be news for your space or events, but you kind of get into this interesting question, which is, what exactly do you want to show on these blocks? And I did share a little bit of this in the kickoff, but a little reminder is there's different types of data blocks that you can have, right, with different data sources. So for example, in this one, I'm specifically querying the San Francisco space, right? You can see that here. I'm selected on a single space. I could also query all of Geo, right, across spaces, or I could create a collection. Right, so this is really three very different modes to be querying just a single space, or you could actually add multiple spaces, but here you're specifying the spaces, specific spaces you want to query, or querying all spaces, or manually adding items to a list. Right, so you would want to create a collection if you want to be very precise about what's in this list, right? You want to curate here, vary the top, and it's not algorithmic, right? In the future, we'll have rankings and things like that. So you'll be able to show the top, you know, have leaderboards or whatever by querying things. But if it's really a matter of manual curation, then you'd create a collection. Otherwise, you want to query, and then you either want to just query this space or you want to query different spaces. So if you're just querying this space, right, you could imagine, for example, that you maybe want to show news stories that you're publishing to this space, and then you're just querying this space. And you're showing any news story that's published in the San Francisco space, show it here. And that's a mode, and for, you know, certain use cases that makes sense when really what you're trying to show is stuff that's in that space. Now, one thing that we need to think about a little bit is, you know, as the number of spaces grow, there's a question, you know, whether you'd expect people to be publishing those things to a particular space or whether content might be published in subspaces or in other spaces. And if you want to enable that, right, imagine not everybody's going to be publishing events to the San Francisco space, right? San Francisco is a city. It's going to go through governance. Maybe it's even hard to update things in a larger space, right? We should actually expect that that'll be the case. Like the bigger the space, the more prominent it is, the harder it is going to be to get changes through that governance process. And so instead, we could opt for a more kind of distributed model. And in that model, what you'd want to do is expect that people are going to be publishing things in lots of different spaces. But what they'll be setting, and right now we have a standard property that we use a lot of places. See, I'll come here to this event, and that property is related spaces. This is an interesting ontological question. We could use different relations to do the same thing. We would need to support more advanced filters for the tables that we don't support yet. So this is why right now we're not using a bunch of different properties and we've standardized on this property. But once we can support the more advanced filters, then we can be more flexible about what properties we use. So for right now, we're really defaulting to using this related spaces. And the idea is, let's say that, you know, I'm throwing an event, it's taking place in San Francisco. I want to publish that event to my personal space, but I want it to show up in the San Francisco space. I want it to get aggregated. Well, all I would have to do is add the San Francisco as a related spaces, and this becomes just a common pattern where on the table, right, maybe it's querying all of Geo, right? In this case, I look at the data sources, that's what's happening here. It's querying all of Geo, and it has the filter where it's showing events, where the related spaces is San Francisco. I think we have a little bug here, by the way, Byron, if you want to make a note. I don't know in what cases we don't actually write what the property is, because here we write the types, but here it doesn't say related spaces. This is a way where essentially you can aggregate it, right? So people can publish in their independent spaces. And right now, we'll show everything here. And in the future, we're going to be working on building out like a web of trust where maybe only trusted spaces get aggregated. So, you know, San Francisco is not going to show events from literally everyone, but maybe it'll show events from all of its members. So maybe everyone who lives in the city of San Francisco becomes a member of the San Francisco space. And as long as they're not like misbehaving, anything that they publish that's relevant will get aggregated up and you can see all of the events across the whole city. So that's, I think this is a really interesting area that I think there's different ways you can do this kind of thing, and we're just going to have to experiment in different places and see how does it scale. You know, right now we're just a few editors and we're just a few members in these spaces, but it's, you know, it's nice to start thinking a little bit about how this stuff is going to grow, and you want to kind of reduce friction while enabling tools for curation. And that's kind of some of the beauty and the art in what we're going to be doing as we kind of grow this out. All right, I think a lot of people are going async. It's great seeing people popping in, asking for ETH. I'm going to try to get my wallet set up so I can also help people out with some testnet and mainnet GRT. Oh, Byron, so on the mainnet, people are going to need essentially Arbitrum GRT, is that right?
So if they're using their smart account, we're sponsoring for them, so they don't need anything.
Oh, right. We're sponsoring also the way we did it with the export keys, the programmatic access. So they don't need anything then on mainnet, huh?
As long as they're using their smart account via the library.
Wow.
If they're using a different account, then they'll need Arbitrum GRT bridged over to RL3.
To RL3, right. Okay, well, people should only be publishing with the accounts that they export. The
yeah.
private keys they export.
If they want to use the same one, they don't have to, but you probably should.
I think that's what we're instructing people to do. So then you shouldn't need anything for publishing to mainnet then. So that's great. So I'll try to have just testnet ETH available soon in case people need that to start to continue publishing. But it's been great seeing the flow of people making sure that they've got things ready. So yeah, it's the final week. We're Wednesday now. We want to have everything wrapped up by Sunday midnight. To clarify, somebody asked me, that's the midnight between the Sunday and the Monday. So that midnight in PST would be when we ask that everything be published. And we're going to have to do a pretty quick turnaround on selecting people to present. But we're going to have something around the top 5, maybe a few more. We'll see how the submissions turn out, but something like the top 5 will present at the demo day. We'll have a nice recording. And excited to have people demo the awesome projects they've been working on. So I think that's probably good for today. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll send out a recording afterwards for the folks that missed this. We'll be available on the Discord if you have any questions. Keep up the great work. It's been really great to see what everyone's hacking on. Thank you so much, and see you online.